Okay, round two of language. All right, here, this is our group, the Germanic branch of Indo-European. All right, you can see up here, it's English, all right? But what we'll see in later slides is they were invaded by the Vikings, Germanic language. They were invaded by the Danes and the Jutes, Germanic language. They're going to be invaded by the Anglos. The Saxons are going to be French, but the Anglos are coming in. So you got 5 Germanic groups mixing with this Celtic language that's already there. Then the Saxons are going to come from France. The Romans came before that. So English is this crazy hodgepodge of languages. But if you look in the dictionary, you'll see that the roots next to the word LAT is Latin. But you're going to notice most of the words are GRE for our Germanic background. And if you're ever watching a movie in German or hear German speak, you'll actually pick up on a few words. Mother is mutter, all right, and things like that. Father is fodder. You'll actually get a sense of what's going on, okay? Alrighty. And then the Romance branches, this is where the Romans were, and they came in and mixed with local languages. So there's this Latin background. And remember, it's a vulgar Latin background. It's the working class, the soldier set version of Latin. It's not high society Romans in the Senate. And they're spreading. And, you know, some people hang on to their language more fiercely, but you'll see that, you know, you're going to have those Latin bases, those Romance or Roman bases. You know, what could come up on the test? I think here this Romansh, which is closest to the original, and they're basically the gypsies, all right? And they are clinging to those that old language. And what you'll see in different places is that an area will go and they'll be isolated or discriminated against, and they really have the old version of the language. Like in New England, they're still clinging to that Southern British accent from 400 years ago. And you'll see in the United States also, down in Cajun country, they're clinging to an old style of French, just like in Quebec. That's about a 300-year-old version of French. All right, so as groups stay isolated, they don't move forward with the changing language as it is in the old country. Okay, all righty.
So in India is very linguistically diverse. There's about 18 different official languages in India. There's 4 families that are represented, 4 language families that are represented in India. But about a third of the Indians up here in the north speak Hindi. And there's only one way to write, okay? And that goes back to their literary tradition, right, being the Vedas. Let's see, some other things, they don't really show you, but up here, Pakistan would be an example. We talked about Urdu being spoken. In Iran, there's a Farsi language that's being spoken. And so what I really wanted to point out was just isogloss. So remember, isogloss is that separation of different kinds of language. And we'll talk more about isogloss as we go forward because it happens on various scales. But this would be a large scale isogloss. Now, another interesting thing about language in India is English. English is spoken by about 1% of the population. The reason is it goes back to colonialism. The British, they went in and they took the Rajas and the princes and the royalty and they taught them how to speak English. And then they were the ones who were in charge. They became the cream of the crop and everyone aspired to be like those people who were at the top of the social class. And so English became a language everyone desired to speak, but not everyone had the means to do it. It's still that way, okay? It's still that way. You know, we hear stories of people, you know, walking through the streets and you know, young children coming out asking if they can practice their English.
Okay. Alrighty. So here we're going to talk about the different theories about how Indo-European spread. And, you know, what happens is these college professors come up with their theory, and it can't be anyone else. So the Kurgan theory, this guy, Professor Kurgan, believes that warriors spread the language as they conquered surrounding areas, okay? And then this Anatolian, he thinks, and I don't know if that's the name of the tribe or the name of the professor, but he believes that it was spread by farmers going over, as you run out of area and you migrate over the next hill, you take your base language with you, but then you create new words. Like Sam just walked in the road. You guys are tripping here in California, but you have friends from Philadelphia and they are? Drawlin'. They're not tripping, they're drawlin'. So in different areas, different words develop for the same thing. Thank you, Sam. All right, you want to come over here and say hi on the screen? Okay. All right, am I taking the next one, Mr. Hillstrom?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Say hi.
Hi.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Sam's going to help us a lot on the maps. All right. Okay, I talked about this before, but I misspoke. I said that all these Germanic languages, the Vikings, the Jutes, the Angles, the Saxons actually were Germanic, and I was thinking of the Normans coming up. And the reason I screwed that up was Saxony is over here, and I just assumed that it was a French language, all right? So you can see those different Germanic groups coming in and really influencing the Celtic language, obviously where they invaded more so, the farther away in Scotland and Ireland. Wales is over here, Cornwall, all right, the less so, okay? So the more someone's there, the more influence, the less someone's there, the less influence.
So this one's talking about the origin of English words. And you can see over here, 26% Germanic. So those early tribes who came in and they were the people in charge, they spread very sort of, German's a guttural sounding language, right? You got man, woman, right? You got horse, okay? School. And what happens in 1066 is the Normans, essentially the French, come in and they invade England and they take over and they become the elite. They become the governors and the people in charge, okay? The kings. And so what happens is, like I said in the last slide that I was presenting on, people will tend to gravitate toward power, right? So if the powerful people are speaking that way, well, that's how I want to speak too. And so instead of man, you get the word masculine, okay? Instead of the word woman, you get féminine, right? Instead of horse, it becomes equestrian, okay? And I'm zhuzhing up the French a little bit here, but you get the idea, okay? So now you can see how much of English is actually Romance language, okay? So for 300 years, the French are in charge. They greatly influenced the language for all time, okay? School becomes university. All right. So if you live in Europe, you don't go to college, you go to university. All right. So here they're showing English being combined with other languages. It's so prevalent that it spreads. This one is talking about Franglish. I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the French, they really don't like anyone, quote, polluting their language. See, French was the official language of 29 countries. It was the second most widespread language after English. And for centuries, the English and the French fought over whose culture would dominate essentially the world. And so the French really, really want to keep that pure French language happening. If you go to France and you try to speak French, there's the stereotype that you'll get shut down if you don't speak it right, if you don't have the right pronunciation and things like that. I didn't experience that in France, but I did experience that in Spain, okay? So, Franglish, then you got Spanglish, and then for German, they put Denglish, okay? Like Deutsch, Deutsche is German. All right. This was talking about lingua francas. Let's see. Okay, so the idea here, most of the rest of the world speaks more than one language. Okay, what a lingua franca is, and you guys are pretty familiar with this because you had to write on your FRQs about it. Okay, if you speak one language and I speak a totally different language, it might be nice for us to speak at least some language in common. Okay, it helps us to negotiate. It helps us to do business together. Okay, and so that's what a lingua franca is. Okay, so when you find people in Nigeria, they're speaking English. How did that happen? Well, it was colonized, okay, by the British at one point in time, and so that's how English. One way that English becomes a lingua franca. But I think we're going to talk more about that on the next slide.
Okay. Alrighty, how are we doing on time?
10:30.
Sweet. Okay. So here they're talking about languages of the internet. All right, and on the left they're talking about most of the websites, and I would say this is from 2017. It's probably pretty much the same. There's more websites in English than anything else. But then you look at the speakers that are using them on the right, there's much less. That's because you've got 550 million Chinese kids looking at English-speaking American websites. All right. Now, I lost my thought here. I was thinking of my dad would think a zero-sum game. He would look at this and think we were losing, but it actually means we're winning because they're looking at American website and buying American products. We were the first ones to jump on this. As we talked in class about the internet was created for scientists to exchange papers. Well, then Americans figured out, no, we can do this to sell everything. All right, so we were the ones that ended up dominating the internet. Okay, all right, here, Europe's official languages. You guys did an FRQ on Spain, and we talked about the majority language or dialect is Castilian, but the Catalonians over here insist on speaking their language, which is half Spanish and half French. The Galicians up here, it is Spanish, but it sounds a lot more like Portuguese. All right, and actually, I read that they're more of a Celtic people here. The Celts were down here trading, and so their bloodline comes from here. They're a little more independent. But the Basques have stayed, fiercely unique. Their language family does not match anything around. Nobody quite knows where they came from. The Basques here in Lodi will even tell you that they're a superior being from another planet. They like to joke about it. All right, but they are clinging to their language. And the Spanish tried to kill it under Franco, who was a dictator, but it's making a comeback. You could also get a question about how the Irish and the Cornish and the Welsh and the Scottish are bringing back their versions of Gaelic in their schools. And then I think another question, possible question, well, a couple, is in Italy, how it can be so different from the South, all right? Well, they were exposed to a lot more trade. They got exposed to the Arabs, the Greeks. Everybody came through trading, so their language was much more influenced by outsiders. Up in the north, they were controlled by the Austrians forever. They have a little more Germanic influence. So you can see that Italian varies from where they're at in the country. Those of you taking French, you know that the northern accent is different than the southern accent, all right? And you're going to find that the Germans go through the same things, okay? One more minute?
Yeah.
I can do this. Am I up next?
I think so. Let's see.
Okay. All right. We're actually going to start with this on the next one, okay?